I'm Carleitta Paige-Anderson. I'm the lead program director for the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Undergraduate Program, or HBCU-UP. And today I am here to speak with you and shed some insight and more information about the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Excellence in Research Awards. So you'll hear me refer to that as the HBCU-EIR program, which is really designed to advance STEM research capacity at HBCUs. I will ask, because I'll be navigating the slides, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll certainly leave time towards the end to address any of them, but I wanted you to know in advance that I was not ignoring any questions that may come through the chat. We'll just kind of facilitate them and address them at the end of the presentation. So just a little bit about the National Science Foundation. I'm excited to share with you that the National Science Foundation has been around since 1950. It's hard to believe that it's been over 70 years, but as a federal agency, our mission is to promote the progress of science, as well as advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare of the country by supporting research and education in all fields of science and engineering. We are excited to be the only federal agency whose mission includes support of all fields in fundamental science and engineering. Certainly with the exception of medical sciences, we really are keenly focused on research and ensuring that it is fully integrated with education, such that the work can be intentional in terms of developing and honing skill sets for the next generation of scientists and engineers. Certainly, the National Science Foundation is a fairly large organization, I guess, relatively speaking, depending upon the size of your institution. It's large to me, but this is a current organizational structure where we're certainly led by our director. And there's a number of offices in the director's office, but what I want to draw your attention to is first and foremost, those elements here in this pinkish color. These are our research directorates. I've highlighted here in a red box here in darkened color, the Education and Human Resources Directorate. This is the directorate where the HBCU-UP program is housed. And I'm also highlighting up here the Office of Integrative Activities in another red box here. This is the office where HBCU-EIR is managed. And so just relatively speaking, based on your disciplinary interest and expertise, while the Office of Integrative Activities is primarily responsible for managing this program, all of your proposals may very well fall into the gamut of all of these other research directorates. And so as I engage with you today, you will hear me consistently give at least two pieces of advice. The first is make sure you reach out to program officers that are aligned with your program interest or your research interest. And so that very well may be persons like myself that fall into the EHR directorate, or it might be beyond EHR into these other areas. But it's very, very, very important, especially if you have an interest in submitting a proposal for the HBCU-EIR program, that you really have an established relationship with a program officer that manages the program for which your research aligns. The second piece of advice that you'll hear me kind of reiterating along the way is to make sure you equally have a relationship with your Office of Sponsored Programs at Prairie View A&M University. Much of what you do and experience on your end is likely informed by the institutional policies and procedures of your university. And so I want to encourage you that as you navigate and either are considering an HBCU-EIR proposal or one beyond this program, any proposal that you're submitting or considering submitting to the National Science Foundation, that you certainly reach out to the program officer or program officers, depending upon the nature of your work, as well as making sure that you engage with the sponsor programs office at Prairie View. So HBCU-EIR, just as a moment for background purposes, this program was initially started back in 2017 following this congressional report that you see here. And just as an excerpt, the HBCU-EIR program was designed to provide opportunities for both public and private HBCUs in order to stimulate sustainable improvement in their research and development capacity. So again, this was and is a congressional mandate for the National Science Foundation to offer this program that is really designed to improve the research capacity of all HBCUs, where the primary goal is to increase the support for researchers at HBCUs that are interested in any research domains that align with NSF's research mission. And so it's designed to, again, establish stronger connections between researchers and NSF programs. So here's that message again. Ensuring that HBCU investigators are connected to and have a very direct line of communication with program officers in the research directorates is core and essential to the success of this program, and is certainly critical to the success of you as a PI on a future award. Or if you're an active investigator, congratulations to you. And we want to make sure that as you continue to implement any EIR award that you have, that you're certainly then increasing the extent to which you might be able to acquire additional resources, ideally from the research program for where your research aligns. I've indicated this, but this program, HBCU-EIR, is actually located in the Office of Integrative Activities. However, it is administered by an agency-wide working group. I've listed here, there's a number of us on this working group, but I really wanted to highlight here the contact persons, right? Depending upon where your research likely aligns at the directorate level. But this really is to communicate that while this program is administered in the Office of Integrative Activities, this is a wide breadth of program officers across the directorate that's committed to ensuring that not only are we actively engaged with the HBCU community, but that you have access to persons who can address any questions that you have, but also can facilitate your proposal preparation and award management processes. If you have any general questions about the HBCU-EIR program, I've placed in bold here the current lead, Arnaldo Vale-Levinson, and his email address. If you have general questions about the program, what you might be able to expect, any aspects that come up as I consider the rest of the content of this presentation today, feel free. Of course, you're welcome to contact me as well, but Arnaldo is the primary contact for this program. However, if you have more discipline-specific questions, again, I strongly encourage you to engage with your disciplinary contact persons, but based on the research directorate, what you have here is working group representatives across each of these directorates. Keep in mind that while these persons may represent the entire directorate, they may or may not be program officers associated with the program where your research most commonly aligns. So for example, if you are an investigator and you're interested in conducting STEM education research, you might find that the Education and Human Resources Directorate is an ideal location for you to submit your proposal. However, as part of the proposal process, you are asked to identify the program where your research most commonly aligns. So within EHR as a directorate, there are a significant number of programs, and what you have here is I serve as a representative for the EHR directorate on this working group, and my colleague Tomas. We happen to be active program officers for the HBCU-UP program, and Tomas also works to support the CREST program. But if your idea most closely aligns with our EHR core research program, we would not be the primary contact persons for that program, but what we would do was work with our colleagues within EHR and place you with the necessary contact persons. So I'm offering this to say, while we have done our due diligence to identify persons to help facilitate implementation of this program across the directorate. These persons will also help you make contact with the program officer that is directly aligned with the program that in which your research may closely align. So if you're considering the HBCU-EIR program, the first thing you should do is visit and consider the solicitation. The current and active solicitation for this program is NSF 20-542, noting that all submissions can come through via Fastlane, research.gov, or grants.gov. Where that happens, again, I recommend that you engage with your office sponsored programs to confirm the modality that best works for your university. Noting that for this program, it is anticipated on an annual basis that there will be up to approximately 25 awards confirmed, with an anticipated funding amount of around $10 million or so. So just generally speaking, this is what's reflected into the solicitation. And again, as I go throughout this presentation, I'll be able to extract more information, but please note that this is a high-level discussion of this program. There's far more details inside the solicitation, and I strongly encourage that you really use the solicitation as a guiding document in your proposal preparation process. So with regard to eligibility, HBCU faculty members who conduct research in science, engineering, and/or STEM education are eligible to submit proposals under this particular program. The principal investigator must be a full-time faculty member or researcher. We are understanding that not every university has a similar faculty structure. But we do ask that the university determines that eligibility with regard to the PIs respectively. You should note that at present, there are no restrictions or limitations to the number of proposals that can be submitted by an institution. So with the number of participants there are today, unlike some of our other programs at the National Science Foundation, all of you that are assembled here are very much encouraged for this upcoming funding cycle to submit your proposals accordingly. There is no limitation, again, on the number of proposals that can be submitted by an institution. Furthermore, there are also no restrictions or limitations on the number of proposals that can be submitted by a PI. However, that we do want to caution you that on average, we do find that most persons that are successful submit one proposal, and there is risk for submitting multiple. And again, that's just based on your research and your interest, your capacity to expend the time and effort to prepare a competitive proposal certainly is up for you to consider, but at present, there are no limitations in this regard. For HBCU-EIR, there are two important deadlines that you should be aware of, particularly for this upcoming competition cycle. This program does require a letter of intent. That first document is due the fourth Thursday in July, for which this year is July 28th. The letter of intent, again, is required, okay? This document really allows for the program to, number one, be prepared on the volume of proposals that may be submitted. And as you know, this is an agency-wide initiative, so it also informs us on a directorate level how many potential proposals that we might anticipate in any given funding cycle. It is very important that in that letter of intent, the PI indicates the secondary program, meaning the program for which your research is most closely aligned. I'll address that a little bit more as we go throughout, but it's important for me to emphasize that in the secondary program where your proposal will be reviewed. So that's very important. As a program, EIR does not manage its own panel reviews, for example. Every directorate is funneled the proposals for which they are aligned and then they are sent to the secondary program or the research program in which that research most closely aligns, and it is through that program officer that the review process is managed. Again, if you have any questions about a directorate-specific management of the EIR proposals, on that previous slide, I've indicated to you the contact persons from the working group, and they should also be very helpful in terms of having you identify the program where your interests may align. Furthermore, for the letters of intent for EIR, there is a maximum number of senior project personnel that is that's allowed on these particular projects, a maximum of 4. And so in this regard, it will be very important for you to consider collaborations very carefully, such that you're able to maximize all persons and their contributions therein. And there's also a maximum of up to 5 participating organizations. So persons sometimes request, can there be collaborations? Absolutely. However, the nature of those collaborations must be adequately described throughout the proposal submission. And again, any questions that you have on how to best demonstrate the alignment across participating organizations would be beneficial. Most commonly, this is reflected in a project management plan of some kind, but it is important for me to convey to you that this track really is supporting HBCU faculty research to be primarily conducted at the HBCU for the purpose of increasing research capacity of the HBCU. So if you find that your collaborations extend beyond the HBCU community, that is totally fine. However, that collaboration should be designed such that it is advancing research productivity at your home institution. The details of the letter, in particular, it should be very brief. It's not intended to be a very long document, anywhere between 1 to 2 pages, where really it should be a very brief summary of the proposed experimentation of the project, and a brief statement addressing both NSF merit review criteria, intellectual merit, and broader impacts. One common question that we receive regarding the letter of intent is about whether or not the scope of work, if it can be changed in advance of the full proposal submission. In other words, persons often ask, the idea that I had in July, after I've kind of made more progress in developing the proposal, my idea has slightly shifted such that by October, is it okay if my full proposal has a different description or maybe a different methodology, a different experimental design, etc.? The answer is yes. Yes, it can change. People also often ask, well, can the research program change? The secondary research program, can it change? The answer also is yes. However, we certainly want to make sure that we encourage you to kind of engage and make sure you get any questions answered as you work through that process, because we certainly know in proposal development, things can evolve rather quickly. And so, part of, again, that process of trying to identify what are the programs that best fit your research, we find that it can be a very cumbersome experience at times for HBCU faculty to identify the corresponding research program. The easiest solution is to talk to the program officer. Talk to the program officer, talk to the program officer. Okay. Another strategy might be utilizing the public-facing NSF awards database. So if you do a search in your internet browser of NSF awards database, there's an awards data search tool that will allow you to either search by program, by research directorate, by title. It can be a keyword search where you can identify previous awards or active awards. They could be active or inactive. But what you can do is you can get a feel for what has been previously funded and where. That gives you some insights into, first and foremost, what might be some active areas of inquiry that aligns with your work, but it also will give you some insights into the actual program that funded that and manages those given awards, and may give you some insights on who might be an ideal program to contact. In doing so, I've mentioned this before, it is very important that you follow the policies and procedures of your institution. Certainly, any submissions to the NSF will require sign-off approval from your institution's AOR. And so you want to make sure that you're aware of how to submit these documents, and then ensuring that your institution's AOR has adequately signed off, because that wouldn't even trigger any action from the National Science Foundation until that occurs. So we strongly encourage that even if you have an inkling of an idea or inkling of some consideration about whether you want to submit to HBCU-EIR or some other program, that you really sit down and engage with perhaps even your departmental leadership about what does it mean for you to pursue this type of research endeavor, and what might be necessary for you to be successful, such that an award is conferred that you might actually be able to fully implement the content therein. I've mentioned before that your proposals and letters of intent can be submitted through at least 3 different mechanisms, that being FastLane, the most common. We are doing a conversion to research.gov, so that is a new, more user-friendly interface for doing so. But there, in this conversion, there are some limitations. And so in the event that you are considering a collaborative proposal, the current solicitation does request that you utilize FastLane for that system. But again, your university officials should be very, very supportive in being able to upload said documents, but also assisting you in creating logins and making sure that your institutional information is up to date. We certainly find that on an annual basis, there are some recertification of login credentials. And so you want to just make sure that you, as well as your university, is in a good up-to-date status when it comes time to submit either the full proposal or the letter of intent. And so again, once you're considering, well, what is my project? What's the research program? We find it important to be forthcoming in terms of highlighting the types of projects that the National Science Foundation does not fund, okay? So generally speaking, the National Science Foundation does not fund clinical, counseling, business administration management, social work, education, except if there is an emphasis in science and engineering education, we do support that, or history, unless there's some investigation of the history of science. So broadly speaking, these are some things to keep in mind as you consider your expertise and the type of work that you want to propose. Again, I've mentioned any clinical studies are ineligible. This includes patient-oriented research, any epidemiological studies, outcomes research for health services, and other population-based intervention trials. These are typically beyond the scope of the National Science Foundation, and there's likely another federal agency that might be able to support that endeavor. In addition, the National Science Foundation does not support any research with disease-related goals. This is very interesting because as a biochemist and infectious disease scientist, I was always questioning, if there's any of you out here who might have similar background as I professionally, I always question whether or not the type of research that I did from a biochemical perspective would be appropriate for the National Science Foundation. The answer is, if you're like myself and you are investigating signaling mechanisms or fundamental research, not necessarily to identify therapeutic targets, that would be misaligned with the National Science Foundation. But if you're characterizing protein function, if you're characterizing, for example, critical pathways to understand the systems biology approach of a given organism, those types of things would be appropriate. And so it is important to keep in mind also that if your research is in bioengineering, with either that applies some engineering principles, again, this fundamental research aspect that will address problems in biology while advancing in engineering knowledge, those are eligible. Again, any projects that's designed to aid persons with disabilities from a bioengineering perspective, that also would be eligible, for example. It's really difficult to fully understand the full scope and scale of every PI's interest. However, we certainly do encourage everyone that if you're in doubt about how your research aligns with the research and priorities of the National Science Foundation, please talk to a program officer to direct you accordingly. As you contact program officers, we do encourage email. We do ask that you not email in a mass email multiple program officers. As you peruse the National Science Foundation website, you'll find that there are program officers that are aligned to different programs, but there also may be multiple program officers on a given program. Typically, this creates a lot of redundancy in our systems. So we do encourage you to identify a singular person to work with to address your goals, especially if you find that they're very responsive and they have kind of a good awareness and ability to address your questions. Feel free to proceed accordingly. How you engage will really depend on the program officer. Some program officers prefer either a Zoom meeting in these days or a telephone call. Either way, however it is preferred for you and the program officer, it's also very important that you are aware of what you want to know, right? So sometimes part of this process is knowing what you don't know, right? Really kind of mapping out what your ideas are and then identifying those gaps in knowledge. And once you are clear about the information it is that you're seeking, this would really help for a more productive conversation with your program officer. So common questions that we receive as a result of this program is, again, persons wanting to know where should they submit their idea. You can likely identify one of the program officers in the working group that I listed before. Once an alignment is made or potential alignment is made, oftentimes prospective PIs submit a one-pager, like kind of a one-page summary to map out and flesh out a little bit what their ideas are. And particularly from an experimental level to ensure that there's alignment, and you might get insight from the program officer in that regard. But there also may be questions about process, right? The process for submission, the timeline, what to expect. We also can address those questions as well. So in addition to the letter of intent, from July to August, what the community is working on, particularly for this particular program, is the full submission of the full proposal. And so the full proposal deadline is the first Tuesday in October. Annually for this year, it's October 4th of 2022. And in this case, the PI will submit the full proposal. And as I mentioned, it will be reviewed in the secondary program. Okay, so and upon your initial submission, you would identify the Office of Integrative Activities as the primary program, because that is who manages the program. But then you will be asked to identify a secondary program. This is the program for where your research most closely aligns. And this will be, that secondary program will be how your proposal is ushered through the review process at the National Science Foundation. So again, transitioning to then, how does that preparation look? Okay, well, again, in brief, I'm just kind of giving you some high-level guidance about what to consider. In addition to reading and reviewing the solicitation, We also strongly encourage alignment with the PAPPG. On the next slide, I'll go into a little bit more detail about what the PAPPG is, but these should be your two primary documents that you use in the proposal development process. There are many components to the full proposal. Again, I have extracted those areas to highlight here for your consideration, where the project description, just bringing to your attention, this is the meat and the substance of the proposal. This is where the PI is given up to 15 pages. For some, that's a lot. For some, that's not enough. But it's 15-page limitation in this case, where the PIs are discussing their research goals. They really should be addressing their plan of action. So this might be in the form of articulating what their specific research question is, their hypothesis, the methodologies that they want to pursue in the form of experimentation. But there also should be some focus, if you will, on measures of success, where it would be up to the PI and the senior management or the senior personnel on the project to map out, what does it mean for this project to be successful? What are the types of outcomes that are anticipated? And how will you know if you're able to advance knowledge in a given case? Also, as part of that project description, another component is the dissemination plan. While it is the award that's provided to the PI for full implementation, we do expect that the PI conveys this new knowledge that has been generated to the broader scientific audience. However, we leave it up to you to decide and describe how you intend to do that. Other components of the proposal is certainly the budget and budget justification. Another common question that we receive about HBCU-EIR is there a budget restriction? The answer is no. The current solicitation does not put a maximum award level for this particular track. However, we do ask that you ensure that the research, the scope of work that you present is commensurate with the budget. Persons often ask, well, on average, how much of an award is given to a given EIR proposal? The answer is it varies. This is an agency-wide program. And so all research directorates have different considerations for each proposal. And so again, using that awards database search tool, not only will you get insight on the concepts as pursued in previous awards, but you will also get budgetary information. So you'll get to see for a given project that's been funded, what is that project at the abstract level, and then of course what the award amount was to kind of give you some insight. The one restriction there's two here. The two restrictions associated or outlined in the solicitation with regard to the budget is that any non-HBCU collaborators, that budget request must be in the form of a subaward, and it shouldn't be at a significant level. There will be a review and consideration to confirm that the primary recipient of this award from an institutional level is the HBCU. So please keep that in mind. And then the secondary restriction indicated here is that the equipment necessary to implement aspects of the proposal should be no more than 20% of the budget. So keeping that in mind as you map out the project itself and also the budget. There is a requirement for supplementary documents. There is a letter from an academic administrator that's required, and also letters of collaboration as a template that's outlined in the PAPPG. But I wanted to emphasize here this required level from the academic administrator. While one of the pieces of advice was to engage with your Office of Sponsored Programs, I certainly stand by that. But here now, there's an expectation that your academic administrator also speaks to how the university is offering its support to you as the PI of an EIR award. This may be your department chair, this may be a dean, it may be your chief academic officer. Whomever that is, it'll be incumbent upon you to understand the culture, climate, as well as policies and procedures of your institution to identify who would be the most appropriate person and what that person can commit to demonstrate their support of you. And of course, it'll be incumbent upon you to really be clear about what do you think you might need actually to be successful in implementing such an award. Is it release time from teaching? We know that at HBCUs there's an increased teaching burden. Is there a need for you to host a collaborator at your campus? Is there a need for you to travel? How will you be supported and accommodated at that time? There are a number of factors that might impact your service to the university and how you articulate what you need to an administrator is important, but it is required that said administrator also document and communicate to the National Science Foundation how your institution is intending to support you in this regard. I mentioned that I would kind of share a little bit more about the PAPPG. That stands for the Proposal Award Policies and Procedures Guide. This is a very dense document. It consists of two parts. The first part is the Grant Proposal Guide, and the second part is the Award Administration Guide. So this document should be used to prepare proposals to be considered by the National Science Foundation. And that first half of the document, it goes step by step from the beginning to end in terms of what needs to be fulfilled, what are the requirements and expectations of all proposals as considered by the National Science Foundation. So the PAPPG, particularly the Grant Proposal Guide section, as well as the solicitation, between these two documents, you will have all of the information that you need to submit a successful proposal. If you're one of the lucky PIs in which your proposal is then recommended for award and you receive award, it is also the PAPPG and the second component through the Awards Administration Guide that also maps out all of the management expectations of a given award in terms of submitting regular progress reports or annual reports, final reports, just all of the budget management expectations, if there's any changes in the implementation of the award as it proceeds. It is this section of the PAPPG that is very useful. And most commonly, all of the questions that we receive from the community, we typically are directing persons to the PAPPG. Again, it is pretty dense, but we certainly know that it is an invaluable resource for not only our community, but us as program officers as well. And so as you are writing the proposal, again, very high level, we strongly recommend that you address the merit review criteria. I'll discuss that in a bit, but also, just having time to complete all of the necessary forms, engaging in productive conversation with potential collaborators as well as program officers, just having sufficient time to proofread proposals, looking at other projects, maybe engaging with other institutions. If you find one that might be similar to your idea and you kind of want to get some insights or some strategies that other successful PIs have used, you want to allow yourself time to digest all of that, but also to communicate in written form everything that's important to make a compelling case for your idea. Again, making sure that your budget reflects the scope of work that's proposed. And more importantly, don't give up. It is certainly a time commitment as you engage in this journey, but we do ask that if you've received previous reviews on an idea, or if you do take the program officer up on their invitation to consider your one-pager and they offer you insight, we strongly encourage that you consider that insight. The program officers have the knowledge of the other types of interests there are around the community on ideas that are coming through this your given secondary program. We are expected to be aware of the current state of the research, the active research areas in our given lines of expertise. And so there's a wealth of expertise that is available to program officers. And if they've given you their time in terms of providing feedback, and they ask you questions and they say, well, you might want to consider this, or have you thought about this? We really believe that we offer that for your benefit, and encourage you to implement that accordingly. And so briefly, what does the review process look like? On the front end of that is the proposal preparation. So whether you take 90 days or longer, whatever that start point is, whenever you start, we ask that you start as early as possible. But as you go through the process of developing the proposals, once you submit the proposal to the National Science Foundation, you should know that it's first going to go to the primary program, which is the Office of Integrative Activities. Then it will be transferred to the secondary program that you identify in both your letter of intent as well as the full proposal, noting any changes therein. Once that proposal is received by the secondary program, it will be the secondary program officer who will facilitate the merit review process for your proposal. So they may determine that that proposal will undergo an ad hoc review, panel, or some combination therein. Once under review, the program officer will consider the insights from their experts reviewer and make a recommendation to be considered by their division director. The division director will then concur. If the award is recommended as a decline, the organization will be notified directly. And certainly if the division director concurs on the recommendation of an award, that award is then transferred to our Division of Grants and Agreements. It is only this division and the National Science Foundation that is responsible for making an award. They not only review the process, the merit review process, but they more importantly assess the eligibility of the institution for managing said award, noting any policies and procedures in place to ensure that the award is stewarded accordingly. But they then notify the organization of the award. So at the time of receipt by the National Science Foundation, on average, this process can take up to 7 months. And so while you are investing a lot of time and effort in the proposal development process, we want to inform you that we are also investing that time and effort for careful consideration of your proposal and making recommendations accordingly. And so the last section here that I just want to highlight is these merit review principles. The same way that we provide you in the solicitation and the PAPPG of what's necessary for preparing the proposal, we equally in the solicitation inform you of how your proposal will be reviewed, anticipating that you will speak directly to these review principles so that you can garner the most favorable support of your proposal where appropriate. And so we just want to note that all projects at the National Science Foundation, whether it be through this EIR track or any other track, they should be of the highest quality and have the potential to advance, if not transfer, the frontiers of knowledge. So we are looking for proposals that are very strong and that really contribute, to advancing societal goals, but certainly that there are various assessment and evaluation components to inform the success of the project and metrics that are aligned with the scope of work presented. I've previously mentioned, but there are 2 merit review criteria. So all proposals must address both of these. Both of these merit review criteria are equally important, okay? So intellectual merit is the potential to advance knowledge. So what is the new knowledge that will be generated as a result of the experimentation or analysis that is outlined in the proposal, but also broader impacts. In this case, the extent to which the project has the potential to benefit society and or contribute to some specific desired societal outcome. Both and, right? Both of these should be considered in the context of the proposal and will be considered during the merit review process. I won't read all of these, but I just am emphasizing here that inside of the solicitation, there are specific questions that are asked of the reviewers as they are considering your proposal. And so therefore, we encourage you to ask yourself similar questions and then confirm that your proposal addresses each of these in a way where the reviewers are not left to question, assume, etc., that you have done a compelling job of addressing these questions in your full proposal such that the reviewers can provide their uh, insights accordingly. And so as I wrap up, if you find as a result of this presentation or any other interactions with regard to the HBCU-EIR program, we just want to say, please start early and set realistic goals for yourself. Please be acquainted with the various ways you can submit proposals. Again, address the solicitation and the PAPPG, engage with the program officer. But I also wanted to add here from personal experience, I can't emphasize enough how much being a reviewer can give you strategic insights on what the merit review process looks like and help you understand what's expected of reviewers, such that maybe you can then be empowered to speak to reviewers in a way that you've had a similar experience, or even serving as a rotator. Again, being sure to consider these options with regard to your institution and the abilities therein. My last slide is just to also make you aware, while I was asked to speak about HBCU-EIR today, I did want to bring to your attention some other funding opportunities that might be appropriate depending upon where you are. So for early career faculty, our career awards may be of interest. If you're a mid-career faculty member, maybe you had an administrative appointment and you want to re-engage and come back to the research space, this MCA or mid-career advancement solicitation might be of interest to you. And then as a precursor, I've agreed and committed to Ms. Cotton that will return and discuss the HBCU-UP program where I serve as lead, noting that similar to EIR, we do have a funding track called Research Initiation Awards that also might be of interest to you in the future. So with that, I thank you for your time and attention, and I will pause and use the remaining time to address any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Paige-Anderson. And there are a couple of questions in the chat box. Some of them you kind of gone over in your presentation, but let's just get started with the questions.
Sure.
One is, if the proposal is recommended for funding by PO after the 6-month review, is it secured, or can it still be declined in the last 30-day review process?
There is a potential for decline. So the Division of Grants and Agreements, they do an assessment of the institutional capability for managing awards. And so they have their own level of review, if you will, ensuring that aspects of the institution as well as the proposal itself are in place. So
Okay.
there's still a risk for decline. Yeah.
Okay. And Dr. Gao, if you have any additional questions with regard to that, then just reach out to Dr. Paige-Anderson. Another question is, if the proposal will be reviewed at the secondary program, then where or what is the primary program?
Yes, so the primary program is the Office of Integrative Activities. They are the program that manages EIR. And so the secondary program is certainly where your then research aligns.
Okay. And there's another question about PowerPoint, and Dr. Paige-Anderson has graciously agreed to share her PowerPoint presentation today. And let's see, I think that is, we can become a reviewer for other NSF programs rather than EIR if we plan to apply for EIR, right?
So you are right if you are asking, can you be an EIR reviewer at the same time in which your proposal is being considered? no, you are unable to be a reviewer if you have an active proposal that is under consideration. In that case, you are eligible to be a reviewer on other programs. Or if you decide this particular funding cycle, you are not going to submit a proposal, but you would like to be a reviewer, in this case, you would certainly reach out to the program officers that are managing those reviews, right? Or managing review panels that align with your research interests that might give you that insight from a reviewer perspective.
I hope that answers your question. If not, of course, follow up with Dr. Paige-Anderson. And another question: after submission until award of the grant, how long does it take if the proposal is awarded?
So on average, there's about a 7-month process from submission to conferring of award. Sometimes it happens sooner, but that 7-month window is on average how long it could take.
And I don't see any additional questions in the chat box, but as we wind up, if you have any additional questions, please just unmute. We've got Dr. Paige-Anderson here. We want to ask as many questions as we can. One thing I want to say to you, Dr. Paige-Anderson, is that you said time and time again during your presentation, reach out to the program officers. There is some hesitancy, and I'm sure you're aware of that. There's some hesitancy on the part of researchers to reach out to the program manager. And that could be for a variety of reasons. If you have any final thoughts about how much it means to the program officers when you do reach out, could you please share that with the team here?
Yeah, so as a person who initially had a sense of hesitancy when I was a faculty member, particularly an HBCU faculty member, I often did not act on the advice that I'm providing today. And I can be honest and say, failure to do so allowed me to learn things at a much slower pace than my colleagues who were motivated and took that risk and acted on this recommendation to get that insight. It is not uncommon for faculty members to take their time and review all documents and teach themselves, right? And really educate themselves about the process. And we certainly understand and we value that. But sometimes the insights that you can get from a program officer are not in the PAPPG or the solicitation. There's unique insights that there might be a question, right? That we ask of you as a result of your question that causes you to think about things in a completely different way. And that only comes from interaction. Exactly. And so there's no real other way to get that kind of feedback, insight, and knowledge without contacting a program officer. And that really, hopefully, is my way of stressing how important it is to have that relationship, not only at the proposal development process, but for any new investigator that has not received NSF funding before, having that relationship to then manage the award on the back end is very important, and engaging with the program officer can help mitigate those things as well.
Very well said. Thank you so much. And thank you again for joining us today. As a reminder, this will be available on our YouTube channel, which is PVAMU Research and Innovation. We encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you get notified as soon as we publish new videos, including this one. If you have any questions, Dr. Paige-Anderson has included her email in the chat box, so please take advantage of that. Review it, review the video online, share it with others. And if you have questions about an offering, reach out to the program officer. Again, thank you, Dr. Paige-Anderson. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.